The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Derek.Krebs. I'll be leading today's educational webinar that's focusing on those migrating from Microsoft Forecaster to Prospero. So welcome, everybody. A few little house cleaning items to start today's session. One would be everybody's currently on mute. If you have any questions, please take advantage of the questions panel there to the right. And especially the last few minutes of today's session, I'll be sure to field those, time permitting. And if there's any questions I'm not able to do during the session, I'll definitely follow up you individually via email. So welcome one and all. You found out about today's session more than likely through one of our email newsletters or out on our website. So a couple little lead-in remarks and personal invites would be to our ongoing educational series. Our website, msxgroup.com. I'm in the webinar area, and I had a session earlier today for those people that are migrating from the Microsoft legacy stack of FRX and Manager Porter to Prospero. We looked at some of those odds and ends focused on reporting, and today's current session is on the budgeting side from Microsoft Forecaster to Prospero. So please do feel free to sign up for future webinars, and we look forward to those future events. One thing I'd also like to mark for your calendars is twice a year during the spring timeframe and fall, we actually have 2 full days of our user forums. So upcoming in April, on the 22nd and 23rd of April, we have day 1 focused on Manager Porter and Forecaster, so a full 7 to 8 hour days of free product training and question and answer. And then on the second day, it will be Prospero related on that Friday, April 23rd. So hope you're able to join in those sessions. If you're not, we'll be recording sessions similar to this. So we'll say a nice little thank you for those that had registered and or attended today's session. So I see a very nice large crowd today, both mixed bag of existing customers and potential ones, so welcome one and all. My name is Derek.Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX Group, and this slide just introduces myself a little further along with the MSX Group, where I always like to say I'm a consultant. I'm not the sales or marketing guy, so I'll shoot from the hip describing how these products can make your life easy, what I call the easy button, bringing to your financial reporting and budgeting process. And if we turn the clock back 25 years, the founding members of MSX Group all started at FRX Software, had great reporting and budgeting products, so good that Microsoft acquired us. And we worked internally at Microsoft going on close to 15 years. We helped shape these existing Microsoft stack products like FRX Manager Porter on the reporting side, and Microsoft Forecaster. So we have a lot of the team members still at MSX Group who originally developed, still support to the day and consult on those products. So we're here to help you as long as you're using those applications, and hopefully you'll see in today's session how easy it is to migrate to Prospero. 2 little bullet points related to that. One would be for FRX and Manager Porter, the earlier session today, we have a great report conversion utility. So it takes all of your hard work of those reports, converts them across. And similarly for Microsoft Forecaster, if you had some budget balances or data you want included in there, we're going to make that transition seamless. And we took the best things of those Microsoft products, brought them into Prospero. And then those areas that were deficient and lacking, well, we've definitely added tons of new features, which I'll be shedding some light on a handful of those today. So thank you again for joining us. I'll continue just for a few more minutes in PowerPoint, but bulk of the session will be looking at the application itself. This slide confirms again the great reporting ability, including drill down to account and transaction level, which never really was in your existing Microsoft Forecaster world, drilling down to the transaction level, including graphs and dashboarding, adding financial footnotes, just to name a few. So on the reporting side, we definitely will focus on your general ledger reporting. In today's demonstration database, we have multiple company, and then additionally we have location and departments in addition to our accounts like revenue or expense, including balance sheet. One of the industry standard and accountant-friendly capabilities that we leveraged and brought continually into Prospero were the user-friendly rows, columns, or trees. So an example for those that are new and haven't really had much exposure to the Microsoft stack or even Prospero, I'll shed a little light that how about in blue might be a single row definition that I might use in 10 different reports or budget templates, which means, hey, the setup and maintenance, I just create maybe one line set or one row definition that I'll use those terms, rows and lines interchangeably. Maybe second, there in red might be a column definition where I can take that same row like my income statement, I could use it for 10 different reports that they might vary by, let's say, the column being used, or maybe third piece of the puzzle after the line and column would be our reporting tree, which is represented in the top there in green, where I can then slice and dice my budget and report data by your different multi-company and or location departments, multi-currency as needed. Of course, on the budgeting side, we always say this is a purpose-built application that gets you out of Excel hell that maybe many of you came from. It has a spreadsheet look and feel, but we call it a spreadsheet on steroids because behind the scenes it's going to leverage a nice little database architecture, including the reusable rows and columns. And then the additional bells and whistles will be taking some of my budget data down to details for human resources, capital, revenue detail, line item details, adding financial footnotes, just to name a few that I'll make sure you're acquainted with here. All right, so now without further ado, there might be one or two last slides, and I'll be sure to email all of you as a nice thank you for attending or registering for today. I'll pass along the slide deck because a couple of slides I allude to are what are your pain points today within the Microsoft stack, like the left-hand column, the current challenges, and our Prospero solutions and fixes to those. So there's one slide here on items 1 through 6, or how about items 7 through 12. Now, from the budgeting side, how I like to approach this and some of the pain points is I have a nice little Word document I then drafted when I reflect upon all those years, hundreds of customers helping with Microsoft Forecaster. What really were some good things and especially painful things? Well, one being within Microsoft Forecaster, if I went from one year's budget to another, or from a best case or quarter one forecast to another, there were several manual steps I had to do. And this actually captures primarily a majority of those, so I like to paraphrase it saying the old way in Microsoft Forecaster is I had about maybe 11 plus steps I had to do every budget version and year. Versus in Prospero, I really only have one step that's required and maybe a second step if I want to copy over some budget balances. So instead of taking a couple of hours like that yellow, I approximate it being maybe a half a day, maybe 2 to 4 hours at least, that you had to go through a bunch of painful manual steps in Forecaster. Literally, it only takes seconds and a couple minutes inside Prospero. Now, a few of those I'm going to mention by term and bullet point some other painful things are in Microsoft Forecaster, the old way is we manually had to create new periods versus in Prospero, we have a more seamless calendar like you have in your general ledger that we can leverage. Followed by, in Microsoft Forecaster, the old way is every year in budget version, I had to create all separate columns. So sometimes that might amass to 10, 20, 50 different columns over time versus in Prospero, I can reuse the same single column year after year after year. I just simply change the report date or year that I want to utilize it in. And that would also go hand in hand with reports, where Forecaster I had to create a new report every single year version, but I can now reuse the reports like our columns year after year after year. Now, I'll probably just stop on some of those paraphrased versions. Now, another high-level thing is I just recapped here on the second page of the Word document that I'll leave up just for a moment and further email to those that have registered or not, is some other nice things we've improved upon on your Microsoft Forecaster process. Now, as I go a little bit further, what I wanted to do is also share with you, both at the beginning of today's session and at the conclusion, is a couple of nice takeaways. One being my email, and of course the chat area for those that are attending live in the questions panel. I'll be sure to field those, especially toward the tail end last 10 or so minutes I usually reserve for it. But for those viewing a recorded session later, there's my email, Derek.Krebs at msxgroup.com. So feel free to pick my brain. Additionally, as I'll wrap up, but how about now as I have this one slide open, if you want to see a nice little one-on-one illustration of this application, bounce off ideas what your unique requirements or process are, I'll be glad to do so, including we have a great free trial version of Prospero that most existing customers took advantage of to validate the power and ease of the tool. So I paraphrase that being as a no cost, no risk offer that please take advantage of. We'll be sure to make sure we validate and get all of those needs, and you'll get a free jump start and implementation. Continuing back to the Word document, one thing is your budgeting reporting, there were two separate processes and usually two separate applications, which means, hey, you had to create different line sets or row formats in both your reporting and budgeting tool. Or you had to migrate and manually export and import actual data to and from your general ledger system and the forecasting budgeting system. Very painful and manual, those export and imports of, let's say, actuals and budgets between the two different systems. Now, additionally, we've all automated that because Prospero now is a real-time link to your general ledger. So as you add new departments and accounts, no longer do you have to manually add those to Microsoft Forecaster. They're going to be read directly from your GL. Now, another key term and ability of Prospero is the ability for non-general ledger data. In our demonstration company, we have multiple company, followed by location and department. And finally, we have our accounts like revenue expense balance sheet. Now, we also can include some non-GL data. Some other examples to bullet point are, how about employee level? I want to budget down to the name or position for some of my HR staffing. Or how about in the sales or revenue side, cost of goods as well. Maybe I want to take it down to the salesperson or customer and or product. So we have the ability to do that, including non-GL data. And I love statistics. Instead of me keying in $1 million for a certain revenue item, I like to have backup buildup, like how many units I'm actually projecting to crank out at what average price, not only the sales side, but maybe on the production cost side as well. So there's infinite flexibility of statistics we can utilize inside the Prospero data warehouse or data mart. And some other ones that you're going to see me demonstrate are the great ability to export to Excel and PDF, which never really existed easily in the Microsoft Forecaster world, including running multiple reports in what we call a report collection. Security. One definitely restriction and limitation of Forecaster was you only could secure one segment inside Forecaster. So oftentimes we had to jump around that restriction by combining multiple companies or segments together, meaning instead of a separate location and department, instead of two different segments, we had to manually combine, concatenate those, which was painful, had some shortcomings and extra manual work. So twofold. One is Prospero. I can apply that security across multiple different segments, including the live general ledger link to repeat a couple of key terms there as well. Additionally, inside Microsoft Forecaster, you had to bounce around and hopefully remember 3, 5, 8 different screens to go to. But now we've more centrally put that into one single spot to make the setup and maintenance and visibility of that more seamless for you. All right, let's now jump directly into the application. I'll be role-playing with two different user types. First of all, an end user, like a manager who you're going to do some budget input or view reports. And then secondly, a power user that most of you on this call, maybe in the finance and accounting area, are in. Now, when I launch Prospero, and occasionally my little remarks might be a little quick sidestep, talking about a nice question in the earlier session about, Derek, what's sort of involved with the installation? Super easy. It only takes us about 1 hour max to install the application, and 3 primary options you have. It could be on your servers. Secondly, it could be on a third-party servers, or you could have MSX host that. So at least you have options. Secondly, there's really 3 primary pieces to the puzzle. We have a SQL database that stores all this budget and actual data, including all your templates and user security settings. We have one SQL database. We have a client front end side. And third, we have a little IS web middle tier that securely and efficiently allows the client to talk then to the database. Now this client I'm actually have maybe on some local computer, maybe some IT has a nice central Citrix desktop. They've had it easily installed and deployed, maybe just one spot, or even it could be a web client type interface if I'm going through, let's say, a browser to launch that, some other flexibilities and options. Now I role playing the end user. When I launch Prospero and log in securely, it takes me to this landing page, what we call the quick launch area. So this column headed reports and charts. I might have two favorite reports of an actual versus budget report, or maybe below, maybe management gave me a rolling 12-month and prior year report comparison. Or if I have the budgeting input ability, I might have this second little shortcut area. And there's even a third shortcut area to go to what we call report collections, where I can crank out multiple reports all in one fell swoop that I'll demonstrate later today, those report collections. Now let's start, and I like to go full circle, where I'm maybe analyzing my actual to budget. And I sort of call this maybe historically looking. Okay, this column to the left, actuals. I can see what I just spent this last month. I then compare it then to my budget. And excuse that, I'm not sure what little blip I accidentally had there. Let me just log back in. All right. Now continue with that little phrase. Here's my little standard way to easily log in. I usually can use what we call Windows or network security, which IT loves hearing. That means we do not have to maintain separate user IDs and passwords. You can use your Windows network security. I am then going to go back to that one financial report that I have available to me. And I want to just make sure my local internet here, and I'm a California resident. We have maybe some demonstration servers out here in the East Coast here. So I'm making sure my local internet connection didn't have a little hiccup, which looks like it did. So I'm just having to reconnect. So my apology here. All right. Now continuing in this quick launch area, I'm going to open up this one report, and based on my user security, what we call assignments, I've been restricted to only see company one data, and I'm going to call that my United States company, for only my Denver location that I am the manager of. So these little fields here for what we call the report prompts, or otherwise known as my security assignment. Sometimes I actually toggle into those little windows and show you how I have limited visibility as this end user, but I'll probably save a couple of clicks based on today's time. Now, continuing that earlier phrase, these actuals are maybe real-time read from the general ledger, meaning I'm not, like you, the administrator, I'm not having to manually export and import actuals to and fro the system. Actuals directly read from your general ledger. This budget may be read directly from the last little maybe data entry I or others did for my budget, let's say even as of this morning or just minutes ago. I can drill down, like the sales line I'll randomly pick on, all the way down to the account and transaction level. Now, when I do drill in, I like to emphasize that I'm drilling across all columns, meaning actual, prior year, and budget, versus many other products that we compete against. And how I say Prospero is different and better is we're able to drill across multiple different columns. Many other products, you only can drill into a single cell, like actual only, not prior year and budget. Now, secondly, I call that the account detail. I'm now additionally looking at transaction level. Now, these two columns just appeared that were not earlier in my earlier tab, my account level. This last tab was when I drilled down to the transaction level, and then additionally, and as you wish to provide me, I can see additional vendor or customer information. And we're using generic customer numbers, but how about that's Staples, Office Depot, Lowe's, you name it, to where maybe this is identifying for me and the end user, or even yourself, where that revenue came from, like what customer or who it was paid to, what vendor. So we have additional transaction columns we could additionally display, like the batch posting date, the document number, etc. Great. There's now down to the account and transaction detail if I needed to research why I spent a certain item. Now, when I did drill in, this was an end user who had isolated viewing ability. Now, what I want to briefly do related to that note is maybe one, I want to show you a nice little report collection, meaning multiple reports, or I call it sometimes a dashboard, where I might be the CFO. Each time I log in the morning, I just open up this little favorite or report collection. And then maybe I want to see some windows or data side by side of the report or graphing ability. And even I'm going to enlarge one or two of these windows, but that might be my dashboard seeing, let's say, a trend of maybe revenue or cash for this month or year, along with some other report data that I'm going to drill further into. Now, I do have a little bit more wiggle room on this one report to maybe break things and play around with. So I'm now just going to open one window I did close from an earlier session I was doing, that being the same actual to budget report. However, the thing differently now is I'm logged in as a power user. So when I drill into sales, the last person only saw one company data, what I'm going to call my US company. Now when I drill into sales, like me being the CFO, I'm now role playing with, I now have access to multi-company, like US, Europe, elimination. Now, speaking of this elimination company, I'm thinking back 25 years doing this and hundreds of real world cases where this might be a company we just acquired that is not on my core general ledger system, where thankfully Prospero, we have interfaces to over 20 ERP accounting systems and versions. And maybe this is even a company that's in QuickBooks or I have in Excel. Maybe I'm doing my eliminations manually offline, but I can pump into this Prospero database both actual, budget, and even non-GL data like elimination, headcount, etc. So that being another ability. And how about my first click was drilling into my company like we currently see. And if I wanted to display as a chart, I could do so. Or if I'm going to go back to my report view and my second click after company, maybe is now my second click being the locations like Miami, San Francisco, and Denver within this company. Same story. Any one of these I can come up here and display as a chart. Or I can go back to the original report. How about I'm going to come here in literally seconds. I'm going to export this to Excel. And never really you had this easy ability inside Microsoft Forecaster, but now in Prospero, I've just exported that data out, which would take me hours or act of God to do it in Microsoft Forecaster. Now that's seamless. And I'm going to call that a two-dimensional Excel output, meaning one Excel sheet. And then just to save a little time, I also have a second example where here might be multiple sheets like Miami Department A or Miami Department B and San Francisco, maybe my second or third location. And finally, this might be just one report, like an income statement where I'm bringing it down to location or departments. But finally, how about my board of directors? I like to send to them every single month a board package that includes 3 reports. So here's report or tab number 1 for income statement, or report or tab number 2 for a balance sheet, or a cash flow. And this simply is what we call a report collection that either I could send to one file like I'm demonstrating, like one Excel file or PDF for the printer, or I could send to multiple different ones. And I sort of call that the offline way to go to Excel, PDF, or printer. That's usually my secondary and not recommended way. My recommended way is I'm going to go back to is within the viewer. The reason being maybe multifaceted. One would be the reason why I like the workspace and viewer is my drill down ability, the graphing ability, me adding financial footnotes, my exporting ability. Now, last little remark on the drill down. Here is my second click when I drill down after company into the location. I'm actually going to close that tab out, and notice I can multitask more nimbly because in Microsoft Forecaster, a lot of times it was only one single tab or window you could see versus not. So I'm going to go back to my original report level, and I'm just going to do what I did before, meaning drilled into sales. My first click was by company, like company 1 and company 2, and my second click by location. Great. I could even look at individual companies or locations, which I'll get to in just a second. But one of my favorite features that we've added within Prospero a couple years back is the ability to change the drill order on the report. So my first click from top down was company, then location, third department if I kept going on, but I'm just going to simply drag location to the top. Now when I click OK, instead of me drilling into company 1 or 2 like US and Europe, I'm now seeing it by location first of all. Like here is Seattle. I'll just drill into one of these randomly next. And then there's my second click based on, let's say, the company and my same type of graph and chart ability. Now, a lot of times in demonstrations, even I'm familiar and worked with a lot of other budget reporting tools out there, but I favor as a consultant for its power, ease, and usability. I prefer Prospero in the Microsoft stack for the rows, columns, and trees type. Now, one thing is on this graphing ability, there's nothing really sleight of hand that I did because I'm going back to the original report where I have this reusable line and column. On the chart tab, all I had to do was turn on this little check mark to allow a chart. And then we have several different chart types I can choose. And sometimes I like to rephrase that saying, no, I don't have to be an Excel master and guru to produce these charts. That some other applications I'll have to be an Excel master to do so. Or some other stories about products that we like to say we're different and better is no, I do not have to buy or use Power BI or some other dashboarding tool. This is all self-contained, included in Prospero. It's not extra separate licensing. These are products I have to learn. It's buy accounts for accounts. One little check mark and turn it on. So there's my sleight of hand, which is super easy. Now let me continue on some other favorite features there, those being the graph and the drill down and drill order, because normally I would have had to have historically usually about 2 or 3 or 4 separate reports to accomplish now what one or fewer reports do. Another of many little features, some will be a little bit more glamorous than others, is or are these buttons to show hidden columns. Because right now I'm just showing the account number. That's maybe one example, or maybe a second example. Let's say this is a quarterly column, and maybe I'm going to show hidden columns for the individual months. Otherwise, usually I'd have to have 2 or 3 or separate reports, and even I can show hidden lines here because there might be some supporting detail if I need to see it. Usually I'm drilling in like I earlier demonstrated, but another option you have based on the look and feel you want and flexibility, we could also use some hidden lines or columns to accomplish that. All right, let me now transition. Let's even look at our budget input screen within Prospero, especially compared to Microsoft Forecaster. So I'm going to go back in as my end user. On the quick launch area, I'm going to open up this one department here. And let me even do one last little click here because since I was on an earlier session, I just want to close out a couple of windows here. So give me just 1 second here as I'm going to remove maybe what a user had earlier open. All right, well, what I just did is, and good checks and balances for, is only one person can have a single department or branch open. I could have 100 different ones open and editable, but only one person can have edit rights, which is good. I don't want 2 people editing the exact same thing based on their save, so that's one thing I just removed from an earlier demonstration I did. So now looking back at this end user, especially the location that they've been restricted to, they have access only to the Denver location, and this window sort of just confirms on what we call security assignments. Now, an earlier phrase was Microsoft Forecaster had some strict restrictions to only secure one segment, but across Prospero, I can grant or deny access to across all the different segments, like company, location, department. So this sort of just validates this person's security assignment just to Denver. Now, secondly, especially for budget input, this user has access to multiple different departments. So here's a list view of the departments within my Denver location that I have access to. And then here in the lower left, I can turn on this button to use a tree view, which is great. I can maybe see a graphical roll-up of all my departments versus Microsoft Forecaster only allowed you one view or another. But right now, we can just turn on this button to say, show me a list or the tree without having to go to separate little steps just to see one view or the other. Another great thing about this is Prospero, we automatically create this tree called all, automatically created and automatically maintained. So if I added, let's say, new departments, nope, I do not have to update this tree. It's automatically done within this all tree. Another nice win and new feature there. All right, now as I open up this budget input screen, Most budgets are what I call bottoms up, but many times as I'm thinking back hundreds of clients across all industries, etc., sometimes I might have some top down, some budget, maybe assumptions, allocations, and usually a confident reply I like doing as a consultant, not a sales or marketing guy, is there's not been a budget model or report I've not been able to produce inside Prospero due to its power and flexibility and ease. So we welcome any type of real case scenarios you do, and maybe on that free trial version, let us prove that out to you. Now, as I do have a budget input screen open, it's going to have a very familiar Excel look and feel, or similar to Microsoft Forecaster, which means, hey, as an end user, I just need about 5 or 10 minutes of your time, show you how to log in, how you maybe enter data, and then we look at some of what I call your supporting detail behind, let's say, the budget profit and loss for this one department I'm in. Keyword there, profit and loss. Yep, most budgets are segregated by multiple different location departments, companies, what I call my different responsibility centers. However, some other good trends that I'm seeing of all these years and companies working with is balance sheet and cash flow budgeting. Yes, definitely Prospero can do that. Additionally, frequency of your budget. Instead of just one single annual budget, especially during these crazy COVID times, maybe I'm going to have a more nimble quarterly or even monthly forecast, which time permitting, I might show you some easy little capabilities of toggling and changing your report date where automatically maybe new actual columns or budget gets added or removed. Now, a few highlights, especially for people that might be new to both Microsoft Forecaster or Prospero. I'll bullet point a couple of these and look to each. One of those would be some of my detail screens, like HR, capital, and third revenue. Secondly, what we call line item detail. Maybe third, us adding financial footnotes behind some of our data. Or maybe fourth, some audit trail history. And I'm sure there's many other bells and whistles that, time permitting, I'll try to tackle as many as I can in today's call. How about starting with one of the largest costs of your organizations? And this is just an expense-only department that I'm in. You see here in gray shade, and that's my preference as an administrator to indicate to you, the end user, what you stay away from, those gray shade, because maybe rose and white, yeah, you key in and edit, but gray shade stay away from. How about the largest cost in most organizations being salary dollar, including nice statistics of headcount, hours worked, etc., including benefits like health, workers' comp, life insurance, and payroll tax. Like notice this account $7,500 for income tax. It starts high, and then it tapers off once people reach their limits. Now looking at the HR tab or detail behind this one department I'm in, I like to paraphrase it saying there's usually about 3 ways I see organizations budget their staffing. The first 2 ways would be handled on this tab either by their name, like Bob or Sally, or maybe by their position. Like how about a registered nurse or LPN or CNA? I might need these different position types. Now notice here, if it were by position, I could lump multiple people all in one line, because I might have both hourly and salary people, like this column sort of indicates, where we call that mixed. But if I wanted to show everybody hourly based or everybody full-time equivalents, like apples to apples, or I'm going to put it back to apples to oranges, meaning hourly versus salary. And a couple other high-level columns would be when they start and end, how much they make, pay raises, bonuses, overtimes, as I'm just going basically from the left to the right, calling out some columns. And finally, even I like to use our company, the MSX Group, as an example. We have employees in about 12 to 15 states here, where I reside in California, but we have a development team in New Jersey, support in Colorado, some field offices, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I, Derek, reside in California, and Derek has a family. So whatever assumptions you want for state payroll tax, or maybe health insurance, we even can add some additional ones. You define that in one simple table. As I go back to this main tab, sort of going full circle, there's then my salary dollars rolled up, the statistics for headcount hours, and let's go back to that payroll tax. Now, I like to show you one screen behind the scenes because most of our competitors won't, because I even set up and done a lot of that behind the scenes for it, where it takes me hours and days to do what literally I can do in minutes is. What I'm doing is I'm showing you behind the scenes for that budget screen. I simply have a master line set and column. Now, additionally, maybe if I'm just going to go from the left to the right, a couple of high-level items are, and let me even demonstrate a second example. Now, here is what I'm going to call flavor or line set number 1, maybe just expenses. I'm going to click on this button to reopen the input. I'm then going to go to Department B, where if I laid out all my different responsibility centers on a table, I might have a couple different piles. Now, this might be one pile or template that has expenses only in it. But what I'm going to do in just a second is I'm going to open up a second different line, because whenever I open up a sales department, it's going to have a different look and feel. One would be, instead of just expense accounts, I'll have maybe revenue and cost of goods sold. I have not got there yet. This is really just my second expense department. But now what I'll do is I'm going to open up now what I'll call department number 3, which is a sales department, and it's going to have a different line set, or we call that an override, meaning a different look and feel. Now, in Microsoft Forecaster, you had 2 separate components. You had a separate line set, and then you had a separate calculation set. You could not really easily see which lines are calculated versus not, since there are 2 separate windows and screens. But now a nice improvement we made is we now put that in one single central screen, both the line and formulas. Now, inside what I'm going to call sort of this second template that I'm using for some of my revenue and cost of goods sold, we're actually looking at a second example of items that are not my general ledger. The first example we saw earlier was maybe the employee by name or position. That's not in my general ledger, but that does not mean I cannot both budget and record actuals to it. Second example is in yellow here, like product 10 motors or product 20 compressors. Those are not segments or dimensions in my general ledger, but we still have the ability inside Prospero to do such, including statistics. I'm always a big fan. Instead of sticking in $1 million into an amount, I like to have build up or backup of, all right, how many units, what price am I going to do or make it as, so I can see better of where I have good or bad areas or fat or trim on my budget analysis. I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm a big fan of driver-based modeling, as I paraphrase that as. And let me just show you one other brief screen behind the scenes. Would be, here's what I'm going to call the default line set when I opened up the first 2 expense departments. So a majority of my responsive centers use this one line set. However, in the override tab, whenever I pulled up, let's say, a department 200, I'm using a different line set, just like maybe different areas of my organization where I might have maybe 100 different responsibility centers, but maybe only have one template or maybe 2, 3, or 4. But here's an easy way that anytime I pull up department 200, meaning across any location, and really this location is really just a roll up of all my locations. Here might be a second example of maybe a reporting tree that has all my 4 prefix locations for Midwest. So if I add a new Midwest location, I do not have to update this tree, nor let's say Derek, and it's a security assignment, Derek might only get company 1, and Derek might also get just Midwest, meaning across multiple different segments. Another way to phrase that. Continuing left to the right, that was our default line set, or maybe unique little override line sets based on different areas of organization. Now finally, let's look at some of the assumptions for human resources. I'm going to call this my top half of the screen, what we call our pay grades, but instead of really thinking dollar amounts like Bob or Sally making 50 or 60, I can definitely do that granular. I like to paraphrase these pay grades as really, what expense account am I hitting for my budget? Here is now our live link to our general ledger, where I see there's the exempt salaries, and we have maybe a second expense account, 6010, for a different position. Instead of me in Microsoft Forecaster going to 3, 4 different screens, it's all on this one screen now. And then the bottom half of my screen are benefits, which either could be benefits, a percent of salary with a limit, like our FICA top line, or without a limit, like Medicare at 1.45% with no limit here to the right. That's what I call percent of salary or rate-based, or benefits in summary could also be a fixed dollar amount per month. If I need to add a new benefit field, I can easily do so in this grid. And then additionally here to the right, you can define these column names as you wish. Like I'm going to come up here on this little button right here. Instead of me going in Forecaster to a second or third screen, I just click on this little up arrow, add an extra filter. And how about I want to create one for cell phone? And then maybe I only have one choice for cell phone. Maybe it's a yes choice. So some of my management and sales managers might have X dollar, like our health insurance might be X dollar for anybody that has health cell phone yes next to their name. Like Derek might have California next to his name on my import file, or Derek might have a family indicating the health insurance that Derek currently is enrolled at that I'm going to budget seamlessly for. And then maybe a last example, clicking on the plus icon. Sure, let's just add 401k, but I'm going to stop there. But you can easily add as many different benefit filters. Now behind the scenes, as I wrap up with this little behind look at HR setup, there's no formulas in the system. Some other budgeting tools I still have some experience with. I have to do ungodly Excel formulas to crank out what this one table does for me automatically. So please do ask if you're looking at different budget tools, say, please show me behind the scenes what's involved, as we always like to be transparent and show you how user-friendly it truly is versus a lot of times I hear after the fact, like, Derek, we're moving back to Prospero because it's been such a maintenance, tedious process. I can't keep up with it. I have to have 2 full-time people just to learn these tools and upkeep it. So some other differentiators of Prospero. Now, let me show you briefly a balance sheet and cash flow screen and a rolling quarter one. Now, the primary thing here is just to confirm, yep, as more and more companies, cash is king. This screen is a balance sheet input. And let me even take one step back before I look at a few other things in this balance sheet screen. What I want to do briefly is in my other end user session, when I was looking at, let's say, one step back, looking at some of my salary detail, or secondly, when I opened up one of these screens and I had some revenue buildup by salesperson, customer, product, possibilities are endless. What I'll now third and finally do is some of my backup and tools I have in my bag of tricks is on the capital tab. First of all, I like to point out that this is what I'm going to call my new capital additions. And let me come to this capital tab. And how about I'm the IT manager and I need to budget a new copier? Or how about I love seeing what I see in Prospero? I want to budget now for the acquisition of Prospero. And you can then detail out your items, like what month you're going to maybe budget and acquire that in. You see the account, like this top line. I'm budgeting for 4 items, each costing $5,000, so a total of $20,000. Maybe I'm budgeting in period 1 versus maybe period 2 down below. And if I go full circle back, because I can come up here and insert some additional capital, but time permitting I won't. I go back to the main tab. Again, I'm going to call that my new capital, including the depreciation that's going to automatically flow through some of that new capital addition. This might be only for Department A. And then finally, I'm going to come back to my balance sheet. This might be at a more aggregate level, meaning for my entire company, not by individual cost centers. So here might be a line for some of our fixed assets and furniture. Now this line could be linked to the asset capital screen on the other. And then the only minor or major thing additionally would be, instead of balance sheet accounts in my line set, is I would have a beginning balance at whatever my starting point that I have on the books for these items. And then to the right would be my forward-looking budget and or forecast. Now you have infinite flexibility of our input screens. Microsoft Forecaster was pretty rigid in that regard, meaning you only could have your accounts in your lines in Forecaster, and you only had your time, like months and years, in your column. But we have infinite flexibility of how I might want to do that. And let me show you 2 other high-level screens on those notes. One would be on this forecast screen. How about now that March is about ready to wrap up with, all I have to do is I'm going to reuse my same column year after year after year. So all I have to do is change the date here. I don't have to go through those 12 plus steps taking hours. It only just takes me literally 1 or 2 minutes to create my next budget version. by copying my earlier one. And really here is my rolling forecast, which I'm always a big fan of. Instead of just one annual budget, now you're going to see when I open this up for period 3, my columns, January through March, or my first 3 months, will now be grayed out. You're then going to see some actuals there for it. And once this renders, I'll then open it up for maybe 1 month later. Now there's the columns I just described in gray shade, the heading actual through March since open up for period 3. That's our calendar fiscal year. Now another trend I see in companies I favor myself is, or are, I like to actually budget multiple months and years going out. So how about I want you, my managers, to give me an estimate instead of my month or quarter, maybe just give me an annual figure for what I call year 2 and year 3. So here's another example of infinite flexibility you have in your column structure of future months and years, including some prior year budgets and actuals that we have here to the right. And how about let me just close this screen, and then I'm just basically going to change one cell. Usually I'm just doing it globally. I do not have to have all of you change it. I just once change that to period 4, and then automatically now you're going to see a 4th column of actual coming across, which means, phrased another way, I do not have to manually import and export budget data to and from my different budget and general ledger system. This is all self-contained in Prospero. Budgets we enter live real-time in Prospero and report off of it, meaning a question earlier was, Derek, do I need to export my budget out of Prospero to upload in my general ledger? And my response was no. That's going to stay in the Prospero data warehouse. I can export if I want to, but it's extra steps we do not need. So here, there's no sleight of hand. I'm basically now just retrieving from my general ledger now through, let's say, April, when I refresh this one screen report. And you can have that data integration frequency as fast as you want. From, let's say, your left hand, your general ledger actual database into the Prospero data mart, your actuals, you can have done as fast as you want, like nightly, every hourly. Most people do it every hour. And then if I'm at month end, I want to do it on demand, I just come up and just click one bit, just say refresh the data. And literally takes seconds that I don't even want to bounce to, since it's so easy and simple that hopefully you're going to take that word for how easy it is by accountants for accountants. And how about final screen? Speaking of sort of flexibility of the report is, instead of me going to 10 different departments to budget some item, I'm now opening up a different screen that has a different look and feel to it. Instead of accounts in the lines, which is probably a more common flavor that gets illustrated, this now input screen just attests to, instead of accounts like revenue expenses, these are now all my different departments or locations. Because maybe at a high level, I just want to budget sales, cost of goods sold all on one screen. And then based how do you want to divvy it out, you might have behind the scenes maybe some extra columns or quarters, but again, let us, maybe in the free trial version, if you have any budget scenarios, we'll be glad to mock that up for you. Then if you decide to move forward with Prospero, you get an easy, free jump start in the implementation. All right, we have approximately maybe 12 minutes remaining in today's session. So I'm going to go back to maybe the question area in case any had come across. As I do have to scan maybe another window, I'll just leave up my contact information there. So please do feel free to email me at any time. Derek.Krebs at msxgroup.com, and let me bounce to a different window to see if anything came across. Now I see maybe about 4 or 5 questions coming in. Let me just try to maybe see if any are overlapping. Okay, one talks about the trial version. How do I sort of sign up for it? Maybe I'll just reconfirm, just send me an email. The second is, okay, Derek, what is maybe your average time for implementation? And my response would be, conservatively, we usually earmark about a 1-week quick start for the budgeting to get you set up, trained, all your reports converted, and then even your live, meaning with the FRX and Manager Reporter conversion, we also can migrate some of your Microsoft Forecaster budget balances and elements across, so that saves tons of times and efforts versus competitors that are usually weeks and months to get it up. And then, 1 week quick start for reporting, 1 week for budgeting. So usually 2 weeks max if you decide to do that. And since they're overlapping the lines, columns, usually it's much less, but we always like to scope out a call because it's sometimes even from as short as a couple days to maybe a 1 week or something. All right, I'm still scamming up and down questions. This other one was maybe some lingering items about the data mart. This might even be an earlier question today. Manager Porter had so many data mart issues that I can't tell you how many Microsoft Manager Porter issues we had with it, where we had to rebuild the data mart. So the development team at MSX Group, about 9 years ago, they redesigned the data mart from the ground up, so it avoids all the lingering issues, and change tracking was a buzzword or horror word that was poorly designed in Manager Porter. That's no longer now an issue in Prospero. That's good news here. Another question is, how can we find out more about this application? One would be the demo request, like maybe this slide alludes to. Second would be training and user guides. Let me show you two things. One is, wherever you're inside the Prospero application, and this came actually from one of our existing customers, this question that I know firsthand that they have a new staff member that's joined their company. One would be, wherever you are inside the application, you can hit the F1 button. The F1 button automatically knows where you're inside the product, and it takes you to a great online help, which means we're updating this continually with new features and functionality. Second related thought to that is these little webinars that, I'll plug, that we have at least maybe 4 to 6 each month for that continuing education, free on our dime, that you can attend. And then that little 2-day forum upcoming. And then finally, for any existing Prospero customers, if you do not have our training and user guide, I'll be sure to send you a link to download those, as usually they're a little bit too large to email. So thanks for that question for that customer. I know very firsthand working with your organization. Thank you. All right, I think I just fielded maybe about 4 or 5 questions that I saw in the queue. Let's see. A few other little favorite features of mine that I'll maybe just wrap up with over the last couple of minutes are, you might have seen a couple of flavors earlier, but this is a nice little report collection where maybe I'm the CFO. I want to see these reports side by side, including the drill down to account and transaction level, including changing the drill order, like company first, location second, as I recap some of these. Now, another is our report and line set maintenance. And let me come back to one of these reports right here, where, let me log in as the administrator to show you maybe one other thing behind the scenes to this report. That is our line set maintenance. That was always a manual tedious thing, including our general ledger segments. And let me start with that latter thought as I'm just closing some windows so I don't mess up somebody else's session later in this week. Now, first thought of a couple would be the segmentation. Notice here, like company, natural location department. Well, one thing is, in our general ledger, we do not have a company as a segment within our GL. What we do is we automatically create that. A virtual segment, I call that. That way you can do multi-company consolidation reporting very easily. Hand in hand with that thought, let's come here briefly to trees. Looking at the company, here's that all tree I described as automatically be creating and automatically maintained. So how about let's role play. I want to budget for a new company or location, and I'm just going to do something like location Z here. Now, literally seconds as I save this, if I go back to my tree, I'm sure you can believe me, Derek, but now real time, I have this location there. And if I come back into one of my budget input screens, I can then immediately start budgeting that department literally in seconds. So I'm just going to open up a budget screen, open input. That new company I just added literally in seconds. There's nothing trickery behind the scenes. I'm doing that on the fly as we speak. There's new location, and wham bam, I'm able now to budget for this new location and or department in seconds. And it's automatically rolled up in that all tree. A lot of times I might have rows that are suppressed to only show me data that has maybe some history, like looking here to the right. And here's some other examples. That last forecast screen had some prior budgets, but then here I might have some prior year actuals, but for this new location I don't have. Okay, good. That's one thing. We're automatically reading from the general ledger, the all tree automatically created. There's some statistics. How about finally, as I get back to one of these earlier reports, where for my line set maintenance, that was always very tedious and manual thing. If I add a new revenue or expense, so I want to show you maybe an income statement here. I'm going to call this a detailed income statement, where I like to show individual lines per account. 1 second more as I render this earlier report we briefly saw. Now, what's awesome is usually I'm able to avoid and reduce maintenance altogether as new accounts get added to your general ledger. Maybe one button I'm going to turn on might be showing hidden columns like the account number, or I believe a second example I talked about might be quarters or years. I've wanted to see the individual months, but my emphasis is in the line set for zero or low maintenance usually. I'm using a single summary account that you can name anything you wish, like EXPN. Above this row, I'm showing the detail. I'm going to go to the line set. Well, I can add accounts individually and manually or through ranges. That's the old way. But the better way is for this expense line. We're now looking at my account pick list using a graphical view of my tree. And then here's a note of my tree I called expenses, which is the range of account 6,000 to 7,999, which I like to rephrase that saying, I do not have to update this account tree, one single and only tree, even though in our demonstration we have maybe a second cash tree, because maybe in this cash tree I might have non-cash items like depreciation or bonus I want excluded in that statement of cash flow report or budget. But here in the tree, I don't have to update it as new accounts get added. I'm showing the detail above, and 0 levels means show me every individual account. Or second example, like gross profit, or however you want to divvy out and group your accounts based on your reporting. Maybe gross profit, 1 level down might be my cost of goods sold and revenue. So I could say maybe show me 1 level down or 2 levels down. Awesome. And then finally, I like to go full circle with this summary account called total expenses. Nothing tricky behind the scenes. I showed you the tree on company, especially adding a new company. I'm just going to open up this one tree, emphasizing again one, that normally all I need in most companies, but our demonstration has a couple. Now here's that range of accounts. We see what accounts are included or not. I can get fancy if I do not have a clean chart of account. I can add some additional subgroups like we're demonstrating for cost of goods sold, etc. if you need to do some further breakouts. Okay, looks like maybe someone might have played around with that cogs. It might have been me, but I'll put it back here to here. Now I just simply dragged and dropped, so if ever you need to reorganize your trees, you can do so. And last click is this expense summary account. I'm right mouse clicking for where is it used. And then you're going to see here, it's used in all these different line sets. So if I change my mind, I just change so in one spot, usually never at all. Maybe as new accounts like the 6,799 expense, but I can easily see that visibility of where that item is used. And maybe last related thought, we're not an Excel hell add-in. So usually some Excel add-in hell is you're going to see some stuff like this out in your network. You're going to see no visibility of what row, column, or tree, whether they're shared or used. You're going to see just Excel file 1 or 2. If I change my mind, I probably have to go back to maybe 3, 5 Excel files to update that manually. Versus Prospero, again, the differentiator. I'm going to show you here under the home catalog view. Really, this is just an inventory of all I have out there in the system. I can easily see here's all my line sets being used. Here's all the columns. I'm going to click on this heading for the line set. So great. Here's all my reports utilizing this one line set. So if I change my mind, I do so in one spot. I can see who last modified that and when. So there's some nice little concluding remarks and differentiator. Otherwise, I'm toward the tail end of my time. I might have 1 minute remaining in case any other questions came in the queue. which I don't think I see any additional ones. If I accidentally overlooked your question, because there are about 7 or 8 that I think 2 or 3 were related to one, or if I accidentally missed one, please do take advantage of my email follow-up. I'll be sure to address those. Otherwise, big thank you for joining today's session, which will be also in the recordings that we'll send out for those that signed up and registered. And we look forward to you at a future webinar event. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.